Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. This is your host, Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode here on NextGen, where we speak about the issues that we are facing in our world today. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 Satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and soon on Apple TV as well. Now, today's episode here on NextGen is one that has shaken a country completely, but is also one that hasn't been given enough coverage. On Saturday, thousands of protesters took to the streets in Guatemala's capital, setting fire to the nation's congressional building, protesting against spending cuts on health care and education. And this is right after two major hurricanes rocked the country and displaced thousands of people and completely wrecked and destroyed infrastructure. So in order to discuss the situation in Guatemala, what is happening on the ground there, we have with us two brave journalists who are courageously and risking a lot in order to cover what is happening in their country. First, we have with us Jody Garcia, a journalist from Guatemala who focuses on covering criminal justice and social justice issues. Thank you so much, Jody, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Jody, I want to ask you, what is the situation in Guatemala right now? What is happening on the ground? What does the environment look like?
Okay, thank you. Well, as you described, during the weekend, there was a big protest, and people were really mad because the last week the Congress approved one state budget in a way that was not transparent, and it removed a lot of money to combat bad nutrition, for example. So people were really mad about it, and as in other years, Guatemala people went to the street, went to protest, but the difference this time was the reaction of the government. The government of Alejandro Yamatei decided to put the police out there, the riot gear out there, and they react in a violent country against people that were protesting in a peaceful way. So that was what happened, and because of that, during the night, 36 people were detained, ended up in jail, and I can explain you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, especially because we saw this form of just absolute riot and protest. Obviously, there were peaceful protests as well. And I want to bring in our second journalist, Asier Vera Santamaria, an independent Spanish journalist, also living in Guatemala, who loves to write about justice, politics, and human rights. Thank you so much for being with us as well.
Thank you to you. Hello from Guatemala.
Now, I want to ask you, Asier, what led these young people to protest in such large numbers in Guatemala's capital? What drew them out here?
Yes, here it's a very, very, very younger country. There are a lot of people. They are very, very, very young. Young protests demand a government that is committed to education in a country where the vast majority do not have the opportunity to go to university, while many young people leave their studies, almost children, to work and help their families. A lot of children are working here in Guatemala. We have approximately 800,000 of children working here in this country because they have to help to their families. The families here, 6 to 10 people are very, very poor, and the children have to work. So a few people, young people, can study here in Guatemala. Young people think that at the end of their studies, there is not employment in Guatemala, and if they find a job, their salary is minimal, which they can barely cover their expenses. This causes many people to decide to immigrate to the United States in search of a better life.
It's really interesting that you're talking about that many of these protesters, these young people, they are protesting and demanding rights for themselves, right? And an end to this rampant poverty that we're seeing in the country. Jody, I know that you have been covering a lot of court cases as well. Tell us about what the government's response to this burning of the congressional building as well as these protests has been.
Yes, well, as I told you, there were 36 people that were detained. Most of them were students, most of them were young people. And during the hearings in the courthouse, the lawyers of the Congress tried to present them as they were the ones who burned the building of the Congress, but they didn't have proof to show that, because there's a lot of suspicions as well of how this incident happened, because usually the government building is surrounded by a lot of police, and this time everything seemed like to prepare. So there's a lot of questions about who did this and why. But definitely the people that were detained, they didn't have anything to do. There were nothing against them. There were not proofs, and the judges decided to set them free because of that. So the general office, attorney, the Congress, and the lawyer state try to start a legal process against all these people. And there were students, but there were also human rights defenders in there. There were also religious people. I mean, that they went to the process just to claim their rights in a peaceful way. So the response was to try not only to respond in a violent way, but still try to have them in a legal case without proofs.
So that's interesting, right? We're seeing the government is not responding. It doesn't seem that they're responding adequately to the demands of the protesters, but rather detaining and putting on trial people who don't even have to do anything with, like you said, with the burning of the building. But I want to ask you, Asier, I want to bring you in to this and ask you, do you feel that there were multiple variables that led to people demanding justice? So many people on the streets, thousands of Guatemalans, that's not a small number. What are the variable factors that led to this?
There were multiple variables because people are in the streets. People not only took to the streets for the 2021 budgets, but these were the last straw that overcome the passions of the population that nothing improves with each government. But politicians use power to steal, while children continue to die of hunger. They continue to kill thousands of people every year here in the streets because there are a lot of violence here, and the poverty and extreme poverty that affects 6 out of 10 people. So there are a lot of problems here in Guatemala. Not only the budgets. It's very difficult to live here in Guatemala. To be, for example, a woman or to be a child here in Guatemala, it's very, very, very difficult because the government only think about themselves, but they don't think about people here.
And it seems like that is what led people to protest, right? The selfishness of a government that is supposed to serve its people. And I want to ask both of you, has there been a face to this protest? Who is leading the protest?
There's not only one person. There's a lot of people, and especially the students of different universities, not only the state university, that there's just one in here, but from private universities. So they are the ones that are leading this. I don't know what you think, Asier.
Yes, I think it's popular. People are in front of the protest, not politicians. Here, I don't know how it's in English. We don't have a lot of power politics in the opposition. Okay. So they don't have a leader. Okay, they don't have a leader. Only people go to the street alone with friends, and they are together. It's the population, the people, the normal people. We don't have any leader in the mobilizations, in the protest.
Yeah. Also,
so it's different, like in other countries. We don't have a leader here.
Okay.
I just want to agree to say that there are also indigenous communities that travel in here to Guatemala City to protest because they have been one of the most excluded sectors in Guatemala. Not only in this budget that start all the I don't know, like the riot. I mean, people were mad about that, but indigenous people in Guatemala, they haven't had their rights guaranteed since a lot of time, like during all the existence of Guatemala. So I think they have a really important face in this protest too, even though they don't have one specific person that represent them. It's a lot of.
Yeah, it seems to me from what both of you are saying that it's the general average Guatemalan population that's leading the protests. And I think that that is what probably makes it a bit more powerful and revolutionary, the fact that it's the average Guatemalan leading it, not just one person. But COVID-19, right? A lot of people here in America with the protests as well, there were certain precautions being taken. How has that looked in Guatemala?
Jody, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
So, with COVID-19, have protesters been taking precautions, and how does that look like?
Well, people were using face masks, but during the riot, it was really difficult to maintain distance.
Right.
So, and especially when these 36 people that I told you were detained, they were locked in a really small place. So even the court system didn't guarantee them the hygienic conditions to be safe there. They were 31 men in a small room waiting for their hearing for almost 3 days, and without sanitizer, without water to wash their hands. So they were in danger. While the protests were happening, I did saw people using face masks, sanitizers, but yeah, I think that was when the things were not so agitated.
Sure. And we will continue to talk about protest, riots, demonstrations taking place in Guatemala, as well as international coverage or the lack of that right after our short break. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Welcome back to NextGen. I'm here with Jody and Asier, two journalists from Guatemala who are covering the riots and the protests, the demonstrations there. And I want to ask both of you, how has it been like as journalists on the ground? What had, just threats to your safety, all of that? Tell me about that.
Well, I don't know, Asier, you want to answer first?
About my work here with protests. They are very, very intense work days, of course, in which there are so many points of interest that is practically impossible to cover them all. On the day of the demonstration, there was too much tension when the policemen indiscriminately fired tear gas, while a minority of young people threw stones and other objects at the officers. At that time, it's very difficult to capture a good picture, but first you have to think about personal safety, of course. In fact, a fellow photojournalist was beaten by a policeman while doing his job, and his head was cut open. The following days, I have had health problems, and I have not been able to go to court or to the different protests that haven't taken place, such as the one that is taking place at the moment in front of Congress. So I had to follow everything on the internet or through colleagues like Jody. Jody is working a lot these days, who did spend 3 days and days and nights in the court reporting the situation of the detained people.
And Jody, do you want to tell us about that? And you were talking a little bit about, the safety aspect of it before we went on live. Tell the audience about that.
Yeah, okay. So, well, in my experience, it was pretty strong because I have 8 years of being a journalist, and I never felt like my safety is a threat as in this coverage. Yeah, I mean, the reaction of the police was something that a young woman or a young citizen in Guatemala City had never saw during protests for years. All of the protests have had a lot of impact, but they always have been peaceful. And so it was pretty shocking at the beginning to see that the reaction of the government, the reaction of the police. And it was challenging because at the beginning I didn't have all the equipment to be safe. But during the coverage, I got to have like a helmet and special glasses, things to protect my nose from the tear gas. So that was something as a journalist I never experienced before. And it worries me and make me think that it is true when people say that you have to defend your democracy if that is what you want. So it was more real this time. And after that, to cover in the courthouse and see how the General Attorney Office was trying to process these people that without having any proof against them, just make me think a lot about the unfair society that I get to live. So I think that made me give another meaning to why I'm doing journalism, and especially in this context of pandemic, natural disasters, because we just faced 2 storms and now this. So yeah, that was my experience. It was worrying, but in the journalistic side, really exciting to be part of.
I think we want to be in all the places, and it's impossible. It's impossible to go to other places at the moment because there are a lot of areas very bad because the ETA and IOTA. It's terrible, but we can't go there and to be here at the same time.
Sure. And, talking about journalism and how important your job right now is to cover what is happening on the ground and why people are protesting, international media here in the United States as well, has not covered much of the protest or the riots. Why do you think that is so? Why do you think that they are so lacking in covering these conflicts? If any of you can take that on, yeah.
In Guatemala, the traditional media do not spend as much time. For example, to be in court following up on detained people, but in general, with the exception of the government media, they all try to cover events from all areas. In recent months, the traditional media have been reducing their staff, and right now they treat much better what is happening in Guatemala, independent media that are not due to anyone, and therefore can show with greater freedom what is happening in the streets from the country. At the moment, the independent media, for me, they are working better than the traditional media with the protest in everything in general, because the traditional media, they don't have a lot of journalists at the moment because the crisis for the
right.
Coronavirus, they don't have money to pay journalists.
Sure. So that you're saying that they're letting go of many journalists, so that's why coverage has been low. But I want to shift this a little bit and ask both of you, when do you think that these rioters, these protesters will be content? What is it going to take? What action is it going to take from the Guatemalan government?
Okay, Asier, do you want to answer?
It's about answer you, Jody, and I listen to you because my English, I have problems to understand.
Okay, your question is about like when the riots will stop, or
yeah, when are these protesters going to be content? What action is it going to take from the government?
Okay, well, right now the people is more, I think, with more intentions to go out to protest. There's another one called to this Saturday. People, because of this intention of to process some of the protesters, people is more like inspired about keep doing this, because this is start with the budget for the next year, but is more, it's bigger than that. The protesters are speaking right now to face the structural problems that we have, like corruption. So my biggest question in here is that how the government will keep reacting, because right now they are being investigated. I mean, the own General Attorney Office has an investigation against the police. So I mean, we already saw this kind of brutality. So I am wondering, like, what will happen, because we still have a new government. This president has just 1 year in charge. So, if this was his first protest, I do worry and I wonder how next will be. So, but what I do know is that people will keep protesting.
Sure. And before we end here, Jody and Asier, I want to ask you, what can people in the diaspora, people who don't live in Guatemala, who want to follow up, who want to perhaps support the protesters as well, what can they do? What are some action items?
Well, I have seen expressions of support from Guatemalan people in other countries. There are people in the US, in Europe, in Argentina. So it's pretty exciting to see how they use social media to support people in here. And I think using your voice, don't matter where you are, or if you want to help, you want to support, you will that can help a lot, because that will prove that this is not just a problem or a few people that want to protest. This is about a nation and how we are being affected by the corruption of the government and now by the brutality of the police.
All right. Thank you so much, Jody, and thank you, Asier, for being with us here today on NextGen. An absolute pleasure to have both of you. And thank you for the work that you're doing for covering what is happening and, allowing all of us here in the diaspora to know the situation in Guatemala. Thank you to our audience for watching. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.
Thank you, Amina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina. Thank you.